I couldn't understand why my wife was so insistent against me reporting for my stolen phone, because I could just buy a new one, until I overheard this one crazy conversation between her and her own about their plan to frame me for cheating so that wife can go play Happy Family W, her recently divorced high school sweetheart and his 3 kids. So, I did her one better. I always saw myself as a pretty average guy, nothing special or extravagant. I grew up in a small town with hardworking parents who instilled in me the values of honesty, loyalty, and perseverance. I followed the typical path, graduated high school, went to a local college, and landed a stable job. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid the bills and allowed me to live comfortably. That's why I have zero idea about how to react to this unexpected situation. I'm sorry if this seems like a huge rant, but to tell you my life story, I will have to start at the very beginning. It all starts with my wife, Stella, and what she did. Stella and I met in college during our senior year. She was a driven and ambitious woman majoring in business management with a clear plan for her future. We started dating after meeting at a mutual friend's party, and it didn't take long for me to fall head over heels for her. Stella was everything I thought I wanted: smart, funny, and beautiful. She seemed to share my values, and we had similar goals. It felt like a perfect match. After years of dating, I proposed. It wasn't a grand gesture, just a quiet moment in our favorite park, but it was enough for both of us. We were married the following year, and for the first few years things were great. We bought a modest house in a suburban neighborhood, the kind of place where everyone knows each other's name and kids play in the street without fear. We talked about starting a family, and it all seemed so promising. If only I knew, but as the years went on, subtle changes began to creep into our lives. Stella's job became more demanding, and she started working longer hours. At first I didn't think much of it. I knew she was career-oriented, and I supported her ambitions, but there were other changes too. Things that were harder to brush off. She became increasingly preoccupied with her appearance, which was out of character for her. Stella had never been the type to spend hours getting ready or obsess over fashion trends, but suddenly she was buying new clothes, hitting the gym regularly, and spending an unusual amount of time on her hair and makeup. When I asked her about it, she shrugged it off, saying she just wanted to look and feel her best. I wanted to be supportive, so I didn't push further. Then there was the matter of her phone. A month ago, my phone mysteriously went missing. I remember the day clearly. We were out grocery shopping, and I realized I didn't have my phone with me. I assumed I'd left it at home, but when we got back, it was nowhere to be found. I searched every corner of the house and retraced my steps from the entire day, but it was gone. Stella's reaction was odd, to say the least. She was unusually calm about the whole thing, almost indifferent. She suggested I just get a new phone and forget about it. When I mentioned reporting it as stolen, she was adamant that it wasn't worth the hassle. Her insistence was strange, but I chalked it up to her not wanting to deal with the stress of replacing a phone. After all, she was under a lot of pressure at work, and I didn't want to add to her burden. So, I let it go and bought a new phone. But then other things started to feel off. Stella was spending more time away from home, claiming she had to work late or attend business meetings. When she was home, she was constantly on her phone, texting or browsing social media. I noticed she'd become more secretive, often stepping out of the room to take calls or closing her laptop when I entered the room. One time we were having dinner, and I could hear her phone ringing, so I asked her who it was. It wasn't out of suspicion, it was a simple question, but Stella didn't take it like that. She got defensive and somehow turned it into an argument. It wasn't like her to be so guarded, and it made me uneasy. One evening while Stella was out running errands, I was home alone trying to shake off the nagging feeling that something wasn't right. I decided to do something I never thought I'd do. I started going through our shared computer. We both had our own laptops, but we also had a desktop computer that we rarely used. As I sifted through the files, I found a folder buried deep in the drive. It was labeled with a random string of numbers, something that didn't catch the eye unless you were specifically looking for it. When I opened the folder, I found a series of documents and screenshots that made my blood run cold. There were messages between Stella and a man named John. I didn't recognize the name at first, but as I read through the messages, I realized this was her high school sweetheart. The messages weren't explicit, but they were intimate. They talked about their past, reminiscing about old memories and making plans to meet up. But it wasn't just the messages that disturbed me. There were screenshots of conversations between Stella and her best friend Cindy. They were talking about me, but not in the way you'd expect. They were discussing a plan, an elaborate scheme to frame me for cheating. The missing phone, that was part of it. They'd somehow gotten hold of it, and they were going to use it to prove I'd been unfaithful. The plan was designed to make me look like the villain, allowing Stella to leave me without any guilt and move on with John. I felt like the ground had been ripped out from under me. My wife, the woman I devoted my life to, was plotting to destroy me. And for what? To rekindle a flame with a man from her past? It didn't make sense, but there it was laid out in black and white. Over the next few days I tried to act normal, all while secretly gathering as much information as I could. I documented everything, took screenshots, copied files, and even started recording conversations. I knew I needed to protect myself because Stella wasn't going to play fair. Then things escalated. I overheard a conversation between Stella and her mother one evening when she thought I was out of the house. They were talking in hushed tones, but I caught enough to piece together the full extent of their plan. Stella's mother was in on it too. She was coaching Stella on how to manipulate the situation and how to make it look like I was the one at fault. They talked about how they'd introduced John and his kids into our home once I was out of the picture. It was like they were planning a hostile takeover of my life. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. The woman I loved and her own mother were plotting to ruin me. It was like something out of a bad movie, but it was my life. I knew I had to act fast before they could execute their plan. But I didn't confront Stella right away. Instead, I decided to turn the tables. I reached out to a lawyer explaining the situation, seeking advice. I also started planting seeds of doubt in Stella's mind, making subtle comments about how strange it was that our marriage seemed to be drifting apart. I wanted her to think I was clueless, that I didn't suspect a thing. Then came the final straw. One night Stella came home late, reeking of alcohol. She was clearly agitated, her face flushed and her hands trembling. She didn't even try to hide the fact that she'd been out drinking with John. She stumbled into the kitchen mumbling something about how things weren't going according to plan. She didn't realize I was standing in the doorway, listening to every word. The next day I confronted her, but not in the way she expected. I told her I knew about her plan, and that I was ready to walk away without any drama. If she was, the look on her face was priceless. She was stunned, speechless, and for the first time I saw fear in her eyes. She didn't deny anything, but she didn't apologize either. She just stood there, frozen like a deer caught in headlights. We had a long, awkward conversation after that. It was clear that Stella wasn't prepared for things to unravel so quickly. She tried to salvage what she could, offering to end things with John and work on our marriage, but it was too late. The damage was done, and there was no going back. We agreed to separate and I moved out of the house the next day. I stayed with a friend while we sorted out the logistics of our separation. It was a painful process, but I knew it was the right decision. I couldn't stay in a marriage built on lies and deceit, but things weren't as simple as I thought they'd be. A few days after I moved out, Stella reached out to me asking if we could meet to talk. I agreed, thinking she wanted to finalize the details of our separation. But when we met, she dropped a bombshell. She was pregnant. At first I didn't believe her. I thought it was another ploy to keep me in her web, another manipulative tactic to control me. But she showed me the positive test, and the timeline matched up. She insisted that the baby was mine, and now, read it here, I am stuck with this nagging doubt. I don't know what the future holds, and I'm struggling to make the right decision. I keep asking myself if I'm being selfish, and if I'm letting my hurt and anger cloud my judgment. But at the same time, I can't ignore everything that Stella did, all the lies and manipulation. I know that, even if the baby is mine, our relationship will never be the same. So, AITA for confronting my wife about her plan and thinking about walking away without trying to save our marriage? Would it have been worth fighting for, or was I right to cut my losses and move on? Update 1. Hi everyone, first I want to thank you all for your support and advice. Since my last post, I've been trying to process everything that's happened, but it's been tough. Stella has been relentless in her attempts to contact me, making it impossible for me to think clearly. I moved out and checked into a hotel, hoping to get some space. But she hasn't respected that at all. She's been calling non-stop, leaving voicemails and even showing up at my work, unannounced. It's like she's in full panic mode, desperate to reel me back in before I can slip away completely. I told Stella I needed time to think and process everything before making any decisions, but it seemed like she was in full panic mode. She's even enlisted her mother to call me, pleading with me to come back home and fix things. It's overwhelming. I feel like I'm being pulled in a million different directions. The decision to request a paternity test weighed heavily on me, but I knew it was something I had to do before I could move forward. When I finally told Stella, she was devastated. She cried, pleaded, and accused me of not trusting her, but I stood firm. I can't make any commitments until I know the truth. The wait for the test results has been excruciating, and I'm stuck in this horrible limbo, not knowing what my future holds. Then, just when I thought things couldn't get worse, I received a call from John, Stella's high school sweetheart, and the guy she's been seeing, behind my back. His tone was hostile right from the start. He accused me of trying to ruin Stella's life, claiming that I was the one who pushed her to reconnect with him because I wasn't man enough to keep her happy. He said that Stella deserved to be with someone who truly cared for her and who wouldn't question her loyalty. The conversation quickly escalated into a thinly veiled threat. John told me that if I didn't drop the paternity test and come back to Stella, he'd make sure I'd regret it. His words sent a chill down my spine. I didn't know what he was capable of, but the way he spoke made it clear that he was serious. He warned me that Stella was fragile, and if anything happened to her because of the stress I was putting her under, I'd have blood on my hands. It was pure manipulation, trying to guilt me into returning to Stella and dropping everything. But his threats only strengthened my resolve. I couldn't be bullied into making a decision that I knew wasn't right for me or for the potential child. After that call, I felt even more paranoid. I started to wonder just how deep this whole situation went. Was John working with Stella and her mother to manipulate me? How far were they willing to go to get what they wanted? The more I thought about it, the more I realized I couldn't trust any of them. I needed to stay focused on the truth, and the only way to do that was to wait for the paternity test results. The next day, I got a call from the clinic where the paternity test was being processed. They told me the results would be ready sooner than expected, which was both for relief and a new source of anxiety. I didn't know what to hope for. Part of me wanted the child to be mine, but another part feared what that would mean for my future. If the baby was mine, I'd be tied to Stella forever, and I wasn't sure I could handle that after everything that had happened. While waiting for the results, I started going over everything that had happened in the past few months, trying to piece together the truth. I thought about the way Stella had become more distant, the strange phone calls she'd take in the other room, and the odd excuses for why she had to stay late at work. At the time, I didn't think much of it. Everyone has periods of stress or busyness, but now it all seems so clear. She'd been planning this for a long time, and I was just too blind to see it. I also began to notice small things that didn't add up. For example, Stella's sudden interest in our finances. She'd never been particularly involved in managing our money, but over the past few months, she started asking more questions about our savings, investments, and insurance policies. At first, I thought she was just trying to be more responsible, but now I'm starting to wonder if there was a more sinister motive behind it. I'm also starting to question the role Stella's mother has played in all of this. She's always been overly involved in Stella's life, almost to the point of being controlling. Looking back, I can see how she's been subtly influencing Stella's decisions, pushing her towards this relationship with John and away from me. It makes me wonder if this was her plan all along, to break up our marriage and push Stella into the arms of someone she deemed more suitable. As I wait for the paternity test results, I can't help but feel like I'm living in some kind of nightmare. Everything I thought I knew about my life, my marriage, and my future has been turned upside down. I feel like I'm constantly looking over my shoulder, wondering who's watching me, who's plotting against me, and what their next move will be. I'll update you all as soon as I have the paternity test results. For now, I'm just trying to keep my head above water and figure out what my next steps should be. Thanks again for all your support. I couldn't get through this without you. Update 2. Hi everyone. Things have been very chaotic, and I knew I needed something to make sense of it all. After the call from John and the tension of waiting for the paternity test results, I realized there was one person I hadn't considered in all of this: Cindy, Stella's best friend. I'd always known that Cindy and Stella were close, practically inseparable. but I hadn't thought much about her role in all of this until now. The last time when I came across a few old text messages between Stella and Cindy, I had transferred some of them to my phone, but now with everything going on, those messages took on a whole new meaning. They weren't just casual chats between friends, there was something deeper, something more sinister hidden in those exchanges. It was clear Cindy had known about John all along, and not just known, but actively encouraged and facilitated their relationship. I knew Cindy wasn't just a bystander in this mess. She was an active participant, and the only way I could prove that it wasn't some innocent mistake was by getting her best friend word. She had played a big part in making all of this happen, and that made her just as guilty as Stella and John. I knew I had to confront her, but I needed to be smart about it. Cindy is clever, and I couldn't let her slip away without getting the full story. I decided to reach out to her and let her know that I knew everything about her involvement. I figured if I backed her into a corner, she might just tell me how it all began. When I called Cindy, I somehow kept my voice steady, masking the anger boiling inside me. I told her we needed to talk, and to my surprise, she agreed to meet up right away. We met at a small cafe on the outskirts of town, a place we both knew but rarely visited. It felt safer there, away from prying eyes. As soon as we sat down, I didn't waste any time. I looked her straight in the eyes and told her I knew about John, about the affair, and about her role in all of it. Cindy's face paled for a moment. She looked like she was about to deny everything, but then she seemed to realize that there was no point. I had already caught her, and the only way out was through the truth. At least that's what I was counting on. She took a deep breath and began to talk, her voice shaky at first, but growing steadier as she went on. According to Cindy, it all started innocently enough. John and Stella had reconnected on social media. Stella had been feeling down, complaining to Cindy about how our marriage had lost its spark, how she felt unappreciated and stuck in a rut. Cindy, instead of encouraging Stella to work on our marriage, suggested that she reach out to old friend, specifically John, who had recently gone through a messy divorce himself. Stella took Cindy's advice and sent John a message. What began as a simple catch-up quickly spiraled into something more. John was charming and attentive, and he made Stella feel like the center of the universe. They started talking more frequently, sharing their frustrations and feelings of loneliness. Cindy admitted that she had encouraged Stella every step of the way, telling her that she deserved to be happy, even if it meant finding that happiness with someone else. At first it was just emotional support, or so Cindy claimed, but things escalated quickly. John began visiting St during the day while I was at work, and what had started as emotional support soon turned into a full-blown affair. Cindy was the one who covered for Stella, helping her hide the relationship from me. She even went so far as to arrange a girls' night so Stella could spend time with John without raising my suspicions. Cindy told me that she thought she was helping her friend find happiness, but as she spoke, it became clear that this wasn't just about friendship. Cindy had always been the type to meddle in other people's lives to feel important by being in the middle of things. She also said that she didn't think it would go that far, but let's be honest here. What did you expect when you schemed to separate a couple? The simple truth was that she enjoyed playing puppet master, and Stella's situation gave her the perfect opportunity to do just that. She pushed Stella towards John, reassured her when she had doubts, and kept her on track even when Stella started to feel guilty. Cindy admitted that she helped craft the plan. They would stage evidence of my affair and use it as leverage to push me out of the picture. Stella could then be with John openly, and it wouldn't matter if the baby was mine or John's, because I would be the villain in the story. Stella and John could live their lives together without any complications. Cindy's role was to keep Stella calm, to help her stick to the story, and to make sure everything went according to plan. As Cindy spoke, I felt a cold anger settle in my chest. This wasn't just a case of a friend helping another friend make bad decisions. This was a calculated, deliberate attempt to destroy my life. Cindy had played a significant role in manipulating Stella, pushing her towards John, and then actively participating in the scheme to frame me. I couldn't believe how deep this betrayal went, and it made me question everything I thought I knew about the people closest to me. When Cindy finished her story, she looked at me with a mix of guilt and fear. She knew she'd crossed the line, and now she was trying to backtrack. She started pleading with me, repeating that she never meant for things to go this far. She claimed she was only trying to help Stella find happiness, and that she didn't realize how much it would hurt me. And then, just like Stella and her mother had done, she resorted to emotional blackmail. Cindy started crying, telling me that all of this stress would be too much for Stella to handle, especially now that she was pregnant. She warned me that if I continue down this path, it could take a toll on the baby. She begged me to consider the child's well-being, and to think about the impact all of this was having on Stella's mental health. It was the same manipulative tactics I had seen from Stella and her mother, and it made me sick. I sat there listening to Cindy's pleas, feeling a mix of disgust and sadness. These people had played with my life like it was some kind of game, and now they were trying to guilt me into backing down. But I couldn't let them win. I couldn't let them manipulate me any longer. The damage they had done was too great, and I wasn't going to be swayed by their crocodile tears. I told Cindy that I wasn't going to drop the paternity test, and I needed to know the truth before I could make any decisions. She tried to argue, but I cut her off and told her that her involvement in all of this had shattered any trust I had in her, and that I didn't want to hear from her again. I left the cafe feeling a strange sense of relief. I finally had the full story, or at least as much of it as I could stomach, and now I knew exactly who I was dealing with. As I walked away, I couldn't help but feel a sense of finality. Cindy's confession had confirmed what I suspected all along, that this wasn't just about an affair. It was about control, manipulation, and the lengths people would go to get what they wanted. I was more determined than ever to see this through to the end, no matter what the paternity test revealed. I'm still waiting for the results, and the tension is unbearable, but at least now I know the truth. I'll update you all as soon as I have more information. Thanks for sticking with me through this nightmare. Your support means more than you know. Update 3. Hi everyone, I'm here with the big reveal that we've all been waiting for. The paternity test results finally came back a day ago, and everything became crystal clear. The moment of truth arrived with a mix of anticipation and dread. Stella, John, and I were all present when the results were disclosed. Surprisingly, John seemed remarkably indifferent about the outcome. It was clear he was staying in the picture regardless of the test results. When the results were announced, it was confirmed the baby wasn't mine, it was John's. John's reaction was a mix of smug satisfaction and barely contained glee. He practically glowed with pride, a stark contrast to Stella, who sat with her head bowed in a mix of shame and resignation. I could tell she was grappling with the reality that her plan had unraveled completely. Now, with the truth out in the open, she could no longer shift the blame onto me. For a brief moment, I felt a wave of relief wash over me. The cloud of uncertainty that had been hanging over my head for weeks had finally lifted. I was no longer trapped in a web of deceit and manipulation. Stella's lies had been exposed, and I was free from the false accusations that had tainted my life. I knew that if the baby had turned out to be mine, I would have still moved forward with a divorce, but remained actively involved in the child's life. Despite everything, I couldn't let the child suffer because of their mother's actions. But now, with the results showing that the baby was John's, my path was a bit clearer. I no longer had to weigh the decision of staying or leaving based on the paternity test. The answer had been handed to me on a silver platter. As John shot me smug looks, clearly relishing his victory, I felt a mix of irritation and pity. I wasn't interested in engaging in a confrontation with him or Stella. My focus was on moving forward and reclaiming my life. I wasn't going to let their drama and manipulations control me any longer. I approached Stella quietly, determined to keep my composure. I told her that I would be sending divorce papers soon, and that she would need to sign them. I assured her that I would handle all the paperwork and arrangements. Her surprise was evident, but I had already resolved that regardless of the paternity result, Stella and I were done. We had no future together, and I was ready to close that chapter of my life for good. Stella nodded, her expression a mix of resignation and confusion. I could see that she hadn't anticipated my readiness to end things so decisively. But the truth was, the betrayal had run too deep. Even if the baby had been mine, the damage to our relationship was irreparable. We had reached a point where reconciliation was no longer possible. After the brief exchange, I walked away from the situation feeling a sense of finality. I didn't want to discuss anything further. The paternity test results had provided the clarity I needed, and I was ready to move on. It felt like a heavy weight had been lifted off my shoulders. The road ahead might be difficult, but at least now I knew exactly where I stood. I want to take a moment to thank all of you for your support and guidance during this tumultuous period. Your advice and encouragement helped me navigate through these rocky times, and I genuinely appreciate every comment and message of support. It's been a challenging journey, but knowing that I wasn't alone made all the difference. As I begin this new chapter, I'm focused on healing and rebuilding my life. I have got a job offer in another city, and I think this is the best time to take it. I'm optimistic about the future and ready to embrace whatever comes next. Thank you again, Reddit, for being a crucial part of my support system through this ordeal. I couldn't have gotten through it without you. Stay tuned for more stories.